To those of you who are so interested in what's happening in the streets of Beirut, Damascus, Amman, or Cairo, that let's get real. There are four important countries in our part of the world: the United States, Israel, Turkey, and Iran. And we Arabs are an afterthought, even to our rulers. I would like to focus in particular in this introduction, this brief introduction, by reminding you of the irony of today's London. Today's London received the President of Turkey on a state visit. My great-grandfather marched, and his son, my grandfather, marched to Damascus in 1916, 1918, calling for the self-determination of peoples. Of course, in terms of self-determination of peoples, I was asked the other day by Ambassador Leon of the European Union Southern Mediterranean policy whether we supported the Arab League. I hadn't actually been following the official press, but apparently we did support the Arab League decision. I personally would have preferred an abstention, but that's only a personal view. Because after all, Lebanon and Iraq chose to abstain on the subject of the suspension of Syria's membership in the Arab League. The reason for that is that I asked at the time of the Iraq War, the Afghan War, and indeed of this impending action vis-à-vis Syria, however that escalates, how do wars end? And for that matter, how do revolutions end? But I think that unfortunately nobody is really interested in asking this not so hypothetical question. It seems to me that in our region today, we're talking not of unilateral relations, but we're talking of minilateral relations. It's wonderful to hear European expertise on the Druze and the Maronites, on the Kurds, on the difference between Shia Arabs and non-Shia Arabs, on the splintering of the region, which we would hope could one day become a pluralistic region, but in reality is, in terms of current security, becoming a nightmare for all of us. We look at the situation in Tahrir Square, and I would like to state the case of, you mentioned anecdotes, Mr. Chairman, of a dentist who had lost one eye in Tahrir Square and lost another to a pellet only yesterday. The eye he lost was covered with an eye patch with 25th of January on it. And today there are many like him who have lost everything. And the questions basically that are being raised: how can you possibly have elections when there are so many external influences? How can you possibly have elections when the outcome of the elections is being predetermined by realpolitik on the street in Cairo rather than in the context of the election process itself? So the situation in the Arab world continues to deteriorate, particularly with escalating events in Syria, the stalemate in Yemen. Egypt remains in an unstable situation. Libya is likely to deteriorate due to the multiplicity of militias controlling various areas and is acting independently of any central command. As a result of the above, it is my feeling that my small country could set the pace, independently of what is happening elsewhere, to show that an enlightened approach based on effective constitutional and other reforms can achieve stability, public order, and progress. I think it's a time for Jordan, and certainly for the Arab Thought Forum, which we host in Jordan, to take a lead. And speaking to His Majesty King Abdullah yesterday, I did ask him, by the way, please don't surprise me with any new announcements while I'm in London. I had the pleasure of speaking to the Belgian press, I think it was the other day, and I just come out of an hour and a half's meeting at the University of Leuven, and the reporter said, "Can I give you a heads up?" And he showed me the mobile. So they then said, "Well, what did you think of His Majesty's statement about the change of leadership in Syria?" And I said, well, of course, His Majesty would like to see a slim, forgive me, a peaceful transition, a T2T, a transition to transition, a change of the status quo on the basis of a conversation and preferably on the basis of the Syrian people choosing their own future and their own destiny. I can come back to that in question and answer, but I do think, and I say here at RUSI, as I shall be saying at King's College, that the time has come for a high-level group of intellectuals and leaders from all over the Arab world to examine the geopolitical situation in the region as well as the specific developments in each and every country. And this could lead to a document that would outline proposals that could benefit each and every Arab country. It could also be the basis for a common position to be adopted by the League of Arab States. Something like a set of principles could also be developed. But if I may go back to provoke those of you who want the lowdown of what's happening in the region, so that they can go back this evening and discuss it with their friends and corporations or institutions or whatever it is. I'm not going to give you that pleasure in this part of the session. I am going to say that in terms of the look east, young man, the US is China's second largest trading partner, and the economies are deeply intertwined. Chinese leaders don't want the economy disrupted when global growth is shaky, and they're preparing to transfer power to a new leadership next year. I want to add to that, as you know, that in terms of the recent statements on the subject, US Navy ships have bombed Iraq and Afghanistan from the Indian Ocean, while the Air Force tries to secure Iraq and Afghanistan from bases in the Gulf. Do I call it the Arabian or the Persian here? Maybe both. The Arabian-Persian Gulf, if you will, and the Indian Ocean. Any American strike against Iran and its aftershocks regarding the flow of oil will have an Indian Ocean address. The US Marines Vision and Strategy paper predicts that the Indian Ocean will be a center theater of conflict and competition in the next decade, while the 2007 US Naval Strategy called for a sustained forward presence in the same region. Herein, ladies and gentlemen, lies the entire arc of Islam, from the eastern fringe of the Sahara Desert to the Indonesian archipelago. Here we have choke points of the world commerce. 40% of seaborne crude oil passes through the Straits of Hormuz, and the Indian Ocean rimland from the Middle East to the Pacific accounts for 70% of the traffic of petroleum products for the entire world. I'm saying all of this and quoting Robert Kaplan in Monsoon, Foreign Policy magazine, just to say to those of you who are so interested in what's happening in the streets of Beirut, Damascus, Amman, or Cairo, that let's get real. There are 4 important countries in our part of the world: the United States, Israel, Turkey, and Iran. And we Arabs are an afterthought, even to our rulers. 1855, the Crimea, different actors, different times. Johnny Turk fought alongside the British Tommy. 1916, we fought against the Turk. And today, we see Mr. Putin with his Confucius Prize, looking with great interest at developments in the Eastern Mediterranean, not least of all his introduction and the Russian introduction of Navy ships into the Eastern Mediterranean, the importance of the port of Tartus, and the resolute stance of Russia in terms of any future Security Council resolutions. Going back to Ambassador Leon, he said, well, you know, I congratulate you on the support to the Arab League. And, you know, why is it that a country like yours cannot do more? We don't want to interfere. We believe in the self-determination of peoples. And I said, well, that's very interesting, because I seem to remember in 1916, we were quite caught up with this call of the self-determination of peoples, and it was stopped by a European intervention. Oh, really? What's that? He said. I said, well, if memory serves, it was Sykes-Picot. So I would like to say that in China we see a gradual realignment from squarely backing Iran to courting the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in recent years. The Chinese fleet visiting Jeddah, the stirrings of a Chinese twin-pillar policy in the Gulf. The United States should not necessarily view this shift as a threat to its strategic national interest in the Gulf. Rather, Chinese engagement with these two regional poles of influence could actually prove beneficial for the United States as it begins to rethink its regional strategy and seek ways to maintain stability without a large military presence. While the rise of a Chinese twin-pillar policy evokes historical parallels with the US's own 1971 Gulf twin-pillar policy that sought to uphold U.S. strategic national interest in the Gulf by building up the region's two rival powers, then with Iran under the Shah's regime, it is a policy most importantly predicated on ensuring that China secures energy resources for its expanding economy. Due to the extraordinary growth of its industrial, petrochemical, and manufacturing sectors, as well as the rapid expansion of personal automobile uses, China is currently the world's second largest consumer of oil, and several economists predict it will be the primary consumer of oil by 2025. So I want to say that there are still two elephants in the room in our region: oil and weapons. I know an American congressman once said to me, "Folks like you are bad for business." So I don't come here to moralize. I'm going with the flow, literally. And in that sense, I just want to say that despite aggressive pursuit of supply diversity, as much as 70 to 80% of China's future oil imports will have to come from the Middle East and North Africa. To meet this growing demand over the past 10 years, China actively courted Iran through a variety of economic and political inducements as a key part in ensuring a stable flow of energy. This partnership underlined the informal alliance structure in the Gulf, which placed China as Iran's ally and the US-backed Saudi Arabia in separate corners. China's emerging twin-pillar policy remakes the mold and has the potential not only to reshape regional alignments, but provide energy dominance and regional stability in the decades to come. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's intensified diplomatic outreach to both Russia and China in the wake of the United States' support of President Mubarak's ouster in Egypt and the protest in Bahrain sent a clear message that it was willing to recalibrate its orientation towards the East if the US missteps. China has welcomed this shift and seized upon the events of the past year to enhance its ties to and support for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. In February 2009, China's President Hu Jintao and King Abdullah bin Abdul Aziz of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia concluded a $1.8 billion contract to build a railway line between the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. I mean, the parallels to the Arab revolt and building railway lines or destroying railway lines defy my imagination for the moment. During a bilateral summit this past June between Chinese Premier Wen Jiabao and Saudi Arabia Speaker of the Majlis al-Shura Council, Abdullah bin Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Sheikh, Premier Wen said that China and Saudi Arabia hold wide consensus and identical interest on major issues, including international financial crisis, maintaining regional peace and stability, and respecting civilizational diversification. So I want to say against this background that currently over 100 Chinese state companies operate in Iran. 2010 bilateral trade reached a record of $29.3 billion, an increase of 38.5% compared to 2009. And most crucially, in August, China's ambassador to Iran, Yu Hongyang, underlined China's continued support of the Iranian nuclear ambitions, stating Iran, as a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, has the right to nuclear energy meant for peaceful purposes. With the US's prolonged involvement in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other neighboring countries, China is slowly but surely beginning to outpace the US's political and economic influence across the region, a trend likely to persist as China continues to align itself with majority Arab opinion, often opposite to the United States, on other salient regional issues like the Palestinian question, evidenced by its recent vote in favor of Palestine joining UNESCO as one example. China has also begun to enhance its military and naval presence in the broader Gulf region, and of course I don't have to mention Gwadar base, the focus on the Straits of Hormuz, China's success in developing Gwadar as a maritime commercial hub now places China just 250 miles from the Gulf's strategic maritime chokehold or the Strait of Hormuz. An intensifying interest in energy security by China, however, does not necessarily translate into an inevitable dynamic of military competition. As the US remains preoccupied with Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, and other destabilizing events of the region, China may prove to be an important strategic partner in helping maintain security and stability between Iran, Saudi Arabia, and other regional actors. Currently, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm getting to is no security forum exists in the broader Middle East, the West Asia, North Africa region, where Iran and Saudi Arabia sit at the same table. Without any institutional ties or informal consultative bodies, the two dominant regional players have few intermediaries. While a common feature for Saudi Arabia and Iran is to interact may not lead to an immediate decrease in hostile positioning, China would build informal channels of consultation that could be expanded when the need arises. Now, when I arrived in Europe, in The Hague the other day, I said, I'm not coming here with a begging bowl. They were telling me about the hundreds of millions after Deauville in terms of reconstruction, G20 and G8 and all that. I'm coming here actually funded by the Japanese and after consultation with the Chinese. And the French minister said to me, well, that's actually why we're taking you so seriously, because we now realize that we're in the same boat. So, once again, the superpowers are jousting politically, with America again trying to show military prowess, but with economic gains at the base, with an absolute panic for energy security. And I conclude by saying, all the while, the people are rising up and roiling from within in these nations for their rights and the recognition of their rights. The meteoric rises and jousting of nations have not been able to control the internal holes and collapses occurring, as even the Chinese are voicing an outcry that basic moral fabric is missing. Defense is connected to the masses and people, as the superpowers are not recognizing that these human tidal waves on the ground are being caused by the total lack of basic needs and rights being fulfilled. Food prices soaring, cost of living, devalued currencies, and human rights violations. Human dignity, ladies and gentlemen, closing the human dignity deficit and thereby closing the trust deficit is absolutely essential to any understanding of the security perspective. We ignore this point at our peril, and it is clear in my time here that the need for a distilling of the issues to their root causes, based on the cry for a common language and basic human dignity, is an absolute bedrock for what is being faced as all are reshaping their policies towards our region in the wake of the so-called Arab awakening. Thank you very much for your kind attention.